Once enacted, the amendments will provide a definition of a coalition agreement to compel political parties to enter into negotiated written and binding agreements in municipalities where no political party has a majority of seats in councils. But this is a limited approach because of the government of national unity, according to some.
The GNU itself having a focus on municipalities, having a focus on local government, also means that what happens at national and at provincial is going to be affected very much by what happens at a national level. So I don't think that we can actually legislate for coalitions at municipality without considering the implications of coalitions at provincial and national on municipalities.
Some, they say the bill in its current form should be withdrawn.
Some of the measures being implemented here are anti-democratic, will result in wasted votes, and infringe on the constitutional rights of parties and voters to see the results of the election being reflected in councils and ultimately in legislatures. And so we think that the legislation should be withdrawn, the Deputy President's dialogue should be finalized, and then legislation that affects or regulates all spheres of government, national, provincial, and local, needs to be introduced.
The ACDP cautions on legislative overreach, and the ACDP will oppose the introduction of any threshold, electoral threshold, at any level of government. The ACDP also will oppose the limitation of motions of no confidence in any legislature, because the ACDP believes that this is unconstitutional.
Kosato says this bill is necessary.
The draft bills build upon the discussion that took place last year, hosted by the presidency, on a framework for coalition government. It builds upon existing legal foundations in the law for municipalities. There is a need to do more further work on it. For example, to say if a municipality, and down the road even a provincial, even national government, if they can't fulfill their constitutional, their legal mandates of passing legislation, passing budgets, electing office bearers, then perhaps a coalition must be required to go into effect immediately, and that can follow along the mayoral committee system where parties are represented in the executive.
Attempts to get the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs were unsuccessful. Abongwe Kobokana, SABC News at Parliament.
To unpack this a bit more further for us, we're now joined by political analyst, Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, and he joins us now via our video link. Professor, thank you so much for your time this evening here in SABC News. I mean, we can see the discussions taking place right now when it comes to the Municipal Structures Amendment Bill. Perhaps let's start off here and get, your current views of this bill.
Well, Mbali, it's common knowledge that coalition formations at local government level in particular have been unworkable and unstable because the political elite have tended to rush into joining forces without designing a conflict management mechanism to deal with their internal contradictions. That's why many coalition formations have fallen apart, and that has had a negative spillover effect on service delivery. So the rationale behind this bill, which is the Municipal Structures Act, is meant to bridge those gaps so that municipalities can be stable. So it is meant to provide a definition of a coalition arrangement. I think also the bone of contention is with regard to the threshold. Some people have a concern that as it stands, the bill is meant to save a dying ANC, or it is meant to bring the ANC back to power through the back door. So those are some of the concerns. But I think the background to this was the national dialogue that was facilitated by the Deputy President last year at WC. And we saw some political parties walking out of that meeting unhappy about the way things were when discussions were taking place.
And, you know, just listening to the commentators there, and of course, some also coming on to criticize the bill in its current form and saying that it seems to be undemocratic and there seems to be a bit of an overreach. What do they mean by that? I mean, you are also criticizing, saying that, well, it seems as if the ANC wants to rule through the back door, especially where we find ourselves, where no political party has gotten the 50% of the votes from the country.
Yes, as it stands, I think the bill gives an upper hand to bigger political parties like the ANC and the DA and so on, and then limits the role of smaller political parties. I think that's the bone of a contention, that there should be no threshold that is put when arrangements are made, even when negotiations are taking place. I think that's the concern that some political parties have, that if you have a threshold to get a seat, you should be allowed to partake into a formation of a government.
And of course, one thing that has always guided these coalitions is the fact that, the agreements always seem to fall away, and it never really binds political parties, to the agreements that they have made in these coalitions. And hence why we've seen these coalitions, just collapse, especially on municipal level. And the fact that, when it comes to the best way of governing these coalitions, would you say that having these negotiated and written agreements is the best way for coalitions?
Yes, Mbali. I think the framework is all well and good. It is drawn from international best practices. As you know, that coalition formations, they come from Europe in particular. Yes, we've seen coalition formations in post-colonial states, in Zambia and in other places on the African continent. But I think they've been more prevalent in Europe, in Germany, France, Norway, and so on. But in South Africa, there has been a lack of institutionalization of these agreements, and there has been a lack of commitment by the political elite to abide by the agreements that they've agreed upon. No wonder they tend to fall apart, and in the main, they affect service delivery. And we've seen how municipalities have not been able to promote development for the majority, largely because of instability.
Do you see this law, or rather this bill, being passed as law in the House, considering the fact that nobody really has a majority here, even though we find ourselves in this GNU?
We have a democracy, and democracy, in a few well-chosen words, is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So I think the public needs to be involved as well, because governments will be constituted on their behalf. I don't think that it should be a bill that is determined by the political elite. So if needs be, I think it will be challenged before it is made a law. So the public needs to participate in this bill so that their views can also be taken into account before it can be made an act that is official.
Going back to another point you made again a bit earlier on, I mean, you're saying that the ANC wants to rule through the back door. When you look at this bill, who does it actually aim to benefit? Would you say that it benefits political parties, the ones with the majority, or would you say that it brings stability to municipalities so that services can then be carried through for South Africans?
Before the bill in question was brought to the fore, there was another one, for instance, in the Eastern Cape that was introduced, and it was meant to, here in the Nelson Mandela Bay, it was meant to assist the ANC to come back to power. So I think even the one in question does have those pockets of helping political parties, in particular the ruling party, even though they have not got the appropriate threshold to form a government, but to be able to sideline other smaller political parties. I think that is a matter of a concern, because I think if there has been no outright winner, even smaller political parties should be allowed to take part into forming government and not be elbowed.
And coming to smaller parties, I mean, what role should they be playing in coalitions and not being sidelined, like you are saying?
Well, you know, the big question that a lot of us have been grappling with is whether, for instance, if a smaller political party, let's say, has one seat, can that smaller political party become a party that occupies the mayorship position, as we have seen in places like city of Johannesburg and so on. But I think they should form part of the government of the day at local government level, and not be told that just because they've got one or two seats, they are unable to do that.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for your time and for that insight. That is Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, political analyst, just giving us his insight there when it comes to the Municipal Structures Amendment Bill.